watching AYV Television.
Freedom of information is recognized as an essential element of the right to freedom of expression in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and other international instruments. In Sierra Leone, the Right to Access Information Act gives the right to access government information and requires the government to disseminate a plan for making records publicly available. The passage of a Freedom of Information law is regarded as a major step to ensure greater government transparency. This legislation, enacted on October 29 of 2013, was crucial for effective, transparent, and accountable governance. It also imposes a penalty for willful obstruction of its provisions. Sierra Leone is recovering and rebuilding from a long armed conflict that officially ended in 2002, an Ebola crisis that lasted about 2 years, major and minor recurring natural disasters, and now a global health pandemic. Donors to Sierra Leone and other multinational bodies have over the years called on the government to increase transparency and adopt other good governance and rule of law measures. In July this year, Sierra Leone was named among 67 countries which did not meet the transparency requirements in the 2021 Fiscal Transparency Report by the U.S. Department of State. This report identifies the significant progress made by each government to publicly disclose national budget documentations, contracts, and licenses. Unfortunately, according to this report, Sierra Leone did not meet the requirement, nor did it make any significant progress to enhance transparency. So tonight we ask, how can Sierra Leone increase transparency and accountability and enhance citizens' rights to know? I am Samuel Weisbangre, and this is AYV on Sunday. Apologizing for starting the program late. Good evening and welcome to AYV on Sunday on Channel 33 on TV and on Radio FM 101.7. Today we are talking about the right to know in view of curbing corruption and reducing waste, especially during COVID-19 emergency. This evening I have with me the chairperson of the Right to Access Information Commission, Dr. Ibrahim Siga Shaw. Good evening and welcome to the show, Dr. Shaw.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Right, I have the president for Sierra Leone Association of Journalists, Ahmed Sahid Nazala. Good evening and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Good evening, everyone.
All right, I have the executive director for Society for Democratic Initiative, Emmanuel Safa Abdullah. Good evening and welcome to the show, Emmanuel.
Thank you very much, Samuel. Good evening, listeners and viewers.
All right, and to you watching or listening, remember you can make your contributions to the program by commenting on our Facebook page. You can find us on the Africa Young Voices Media Empire Facebook page, and alternatively, you can phone in when we open the call line, but the number to do so is +232 30622 766 +232 30622 766. I'm going to start off with you, Emmanuel. You've been very, integral when we talk about putting laws or advocating for freedom of expression and access to information. I mean, there was a time we had a conversation and you were talking about, let's go in for the low-hanging fruits when we talk about access to information and all of that. Give us a baseline where we are in terms of the right to access information in Sierra Leone.
So thank you very much. This is a very interesting question, and thank you for having me on the panel. As usual, it's always great to discuss issues like this. Access to information is something that is very close to my heart and to the work that Society for Democratic Initiatives does. So before I go into the question, just to inform everyone that, on the 28th of September, the United Nations has declared that it's the International Rights to Know Day, Freedom of Information Day, Universal Access to Information Day. And so we'll be celebrating that day, and the Right to Access Information Commission and other organizations are putting together plans. So Sierra Leone as a country is coming from a system where secrecy was part of our culture, not just a way of life. I mean, not just part of the legal system, but basically it's something that has been enculturized. So we are moving from that system to enacting a freedom of information law. If you notice, we spent about 10 to 15 years advocating for the passage of the law. So the first point is that we have passed a law, which is a good thing. We've taken a step among many other nations. Have joined the elites club of countries that have taken the bold steps. The next stage is to establish the Right to Access Information Commission, which Dr. Shagashaw here is heading, and it took us another 3 to 4 years after the law was passed before it was established. So we've met that threshold. That's where we are. We still have a lot of challenges about funding the commission, having the commission work, which we'll discuss in the program, records management so that citizens can access information, and in fact having people who respond to requests from citizens, journalists, as well as civil society and researchers on the integral part of the law, which is actually releasing government-held information. And like you said on the report, it's not just about having the law, it's not just having a commission that is underfunded. It's really about having the law, having the commission, building the infrastructure within the MDAs with information officers, and then a records management system and releasing information. And then we can say we have arrived. But as we are now, we are halfway through.
When you mentioned earlier that we were used to operate in secrecy, it brings to mind, especially with the establishment of the Right to Access Information Commission, I mean, other existing laws. Take, for example, the Official Secrets Act of 1911, and of course the Public Order Act. We've gone past that. That is something we're now celebrating. You also have the National Security and Central Intelligence Act of 2002. And the aim at the end of the day is basically to deny certain people, journalists, the public, some information that they would classify as being threats to state security. And if you look at the composition of those who form the board under the chairmanship of the president, it still speaks to the issue of are the authorities really willing to give access to information?
So the answer to that is very clear. As we speak, the answer is no. You have to understand. I mean, forget you're putting Sierra Leone on the map because we're discussing Sierra Leone, but just move out of Sierra Leone. Public institutions, public officials, they're always reluctant to release information to people because this is what, in fact, in the US, they call the freedom of information and access to information, they call it the sunshine law, spotlighting what they do, their activities. And when people operate behind the closed doors or the confines of their offices, they are comfortable to doing things wrong. Once you spotlight it, firstly, you are able to expose the wrongdoings, and you're able to point out the things that are supposed to be done there. So public officials are not happy about the law. They don't want to do it. So you find out that they find excuses and reasons. But we also have to be mindful that even within the Right to Access Information Act of 2013, there are exemptions, right? Right. And those exemptions, one include the national security, and now you just mentioned the ONS Act and Official Secrets Act, etc. Now, what we have not done, which I think we all need to do, is to test the law. Where we are denied, we go to court and have the court interpret. Because in terms of jurisprudence on this, globally, you have to assess every case on a case-by-case basis. You don't have a blanket kind of exemption that says this is national security. Now, the courts will look at certain information and say, but what legitimate harm is this information release going to do to Sierra Leone? What destruction, what disorder is it going to cause? If it's not going to cause it, then in the public interest, you should release it. So that's the thing, and we need to move away from just the rhetorics of having the law, of educating people, to actually testing the law within this.
I want to bring in Siga, but before I bring in Dr. Shaw, let me ask you this question. As you talk about going to the court and test the courts, in a situation where what is in the interest of the public has to be determined by the judiciary, and you look at how things work, and at the end of the day, people will definitely speculate how things are going to pan out. If we're going to leave that, I mean, what's in the interest of the public has to be determined by the judiciary.
Wait, so there are three levels of this. The judiciary is the last stop. So if you went to AYV, for example, and if AYV is a public institution and made a request to them, and then they refused you. Right. So Samia refused you. You can apply to the boss of Samia, whoever the boss is, to review Samia's decision. So it's the first layer of appeal. Then if you don't get any favorable answer, you go to the Right to Access Information Commission, which is the second layer of appeal, inexpensive and accessible. They have a timeline within which they should sit and assess, you know. They also have the powers of the High Court. They have a quasi-judicial powers where they can get a panel and sit and actually listen to the case. They have the powers to give instructions, they have the powers to give orders, they have the power to force people to appear before them. Now, if you're also dissatisfied with that decision, then you go to the court. I mean, again, the judiciary has to live up to the expectation of what society and democracy and the rule of law expects of them. Issues of citizens accessing information from public institutions should not be anything that should be contentious enough or political enough for the judiciary not to really properly adjudicate. The assumption or the presumption is that the judiciary is independent and they should sit on these matters, look at the issues on a case-by-case basis, and make a ruling in favor of the spirit and intent of the Right to Access Information Law, which is openness, transparency, and citizens accessing information held by public bodies.
All right, Dr. Shaw, let me quickly bring you in before I bring in Ahmed. Let's talk about the Right to Access Information Commission. You were trying to push for the proactive disclosure of information, and we've seen that has been a challenge. It's not happening. Institutions are not complying. Now, take us through the current position of the Commission with regards getting other institutions to proactively disclose information that are of benefits to the public.
Yeah, actually, it's a big challenge. The compliance rate is really low. I mean, including, of course, the proactive disclosure of information, as you have rightly put it. You know, although the situation is not as bleak as, you know, although it has been a bit difficult moving from a culture of, you know, secrecy to a culture of, you know, openness, it has not been easy at all. You know, people have been used to doing things in secret. And now, you know, telling them that they have to proactively disclose information. You know, there are a lot of questions that have been asked, you know, raised in our campaign, you know, engaging the public authorities to try and encourage them. For instance, if you look at the compliance rate in 2019, only 10 public authorities actually proactively, you know, in fact, submitted publication schemes. They did not necessarily meet the threshold
for publication,
but they submitted, and out of those 10, you know, only one actually fully met the compliance. Only one. That's Statistics Sierra Leone, and the rest. Some of them met the 22 classes of information partially, you know, so we gave them conditional approval, and those that met almost 80 to 90%, you know, only two of out of the 10, only two actually met that, you know, and then 3 were rejected completely, you know, out of the 10. So it gives you an idea, you know, although we, you know, advocated a lot, we organized a lot of public engagement activities in 2019. But when you look at the number, you know, was really very, you know, not encouraging enough. And then in 2020, you know, the survey that we participated also in the UNESCO survey, the number increased a bit. 20 submitted proactive disclosure schemes, publication schemes. And out of the 20, only 10 actually met 80 to 90% of the minimum, you know, 22 classes of information. So that just gives you, you know, an idea. And out of the 20, the remaining 10, 8, you know, met the conditional. That is, they were only able to meet half of the 22 classes of information. They were only able to proactively disclose only half of the 22 classes of information that they are supposed to. And you know, and it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge. And some of the challenges, because we've been working with consultants who have been engaging, working with them, you know, some have been saying that the funding has been an issue. You know, for instance, one of the ways, I mean, the public authorities are supposed to proactively disclose information is to have websites, you know, and some would say, because in the times of the management decisions, some of these public information officers, they are not actually those who are employed in these MDAs. Some of them are not in that decision-making category, you know, and so when budgets are prepared, you know,
they are left out.
They are left out. And so those are some of the reasons that they have been given. And also
that's quite an interesting submission as to why actually they've been failing to meet to comply.
Another point that because recently we decided to up our game in the public engagement, particularly public the MDAs.
Right.
We've been holding consultative meetings with MDAs, you know, particularly ministries, and making sure that the ministries will have all their sector leads as well. And one of the things that have emerged as why they have not been really very proactively, you know, disclosing information is this secrecy thing that you mentioned just now. The Secrecy Act. You know, that most civils are, even including public information officers, they consider themselves as civil servants. So it means when they are recruited, they are straight away introduced into the kind of idea that they should not, the mindset, you know, the culture within the civil service that, you know, they should not release any information. You know, they have to go through the permanent secretary, for instance, you know, and sometimes the bureaucracy. Suppose the permanent secretary is not there immediately.
Can I ask this question? Let me put it in.
That is why there has been we have experienced some delays in the past, you know, in the recent past. Most of the complaints that have been coming, like people contacting us, they have been raising concerns that there have been delays in public authorities responding.
Let me ask you this question, Dr. Shaw. We live in a society where, fortunately for those, ruling or those governing the country, we have limited amount of people who would want to make use of the law, to access government information. And so it's for them it should be a field day. But in simple terms, government institutions undermining one of its own bodies, put to ensure that the issue of good governance, transparency and accountability, these features are achieved. It's not happening. So what would you do in a situation where these things, Emmanuel mentioned, you have, the power of the high courts. You have, quasi-judicial powers. And what would you do in instances like that where institutions fail to comply with the provisions of the Act?
Well, though there are some few gray areas in the Act. For instance, if, for instance, a public authority refuses to proactively disclose information, it is, an individual, a member of the public, can force the public authority to proactively disclose information. It can kind of take the public authority to court, and subject the public authority to a situation where they should explain why they are not proactively disclosing the 22 minimum classes of information. Because the 22 minimum classes of information, there is no exempt provision among the 22 classes. They are all supposed to be proactively disclosed. So for instance, Mr. Abdullahi was alluding to exempt sections. Of course they are there. But the 22 classes of information, none of them, is exempt.
So who should take the public authority to court? The individual requesting information?
Say the individual.
This is interesting.
My understanding is that the Commission, if I recall well, the Commission also has powers to enforce the compliance, especially on proactive disclosure, which is in Section 8 of the Act. Now, if the Commission has developed a kind of a proactive disclosure scheme, and allow the institutions to also develop theirs. And if they don't comply with it, the Commission has powers to enforce that, to basically levy fines or take administrative action.
Yeah, of course, use Section 43.
Yes.
We can do that. But, for instance, like the case, there are some areas that actually need to be reviewed. For instance, the case of the SDI, the request that the SDI made to about 5 MDs and the Ministry of Health defaulted. All the others complied. They provided the information, the COVID-related information that you guys requested for. And we issued an order, evoking Section 43, to tell the Ministry of Health that they are supposed to release the information, and then we find them, 70 million. But according to that section, it is the requester, that lodged the complaint to us that should really take, the matter to court to enforce compliance, not us. So you see, because we are more
because I think the idea is
so that's one of the things that we have been looking at maybe after 10 years in maybe asking for review.
It's quite interesting. I'm tempted to ask just quickly before I bring in slide president.
It's taken a long time since, and we are waiting still for SDI to take the Ministry of Health to court. To pay the fine.
And that is the most interesting. That's the most interesting part. Let me ask you. We are very much involved. I mean, in the entire, even in the development of the act, you are very much involved. Let's have this very clear. If there is a law and a commission that should help me to access information, and at the end of the day, if I've requested for a piece of information and I've not gotten that, perhaps the public authority did not comply, I have to take the matter to court.
Yes.
So,
let me explain.
Go ahead, quickly. I'm just a little bit.
As one of the drafters of the legislation, if I still remember, if the commission imposed fines, we don't enforce those fines. If the institutions, they should enforce the fines.
Right.
In fact, in most jurisdictions, and this is where I differ with how the commission is interpreting in the very conservative way they interpreting the legislation. Now, in most jurisdictions, now if we went to court, for example, against the Ministry of Health, commission can come in with what they call as a friend of the court to support our position. Right. And I do understand the dynamics of one government institution going against the other, but the Right to Access Information Commission is really an independent body created to enforce citizens' access to information, kind of a regulator.
Right.
So you can come in as an amicus and support our position. But if they imposed fines, we don't go and enforce those fines. The money is not coming to us. Right. It's going into their coffers, which they also recoup and put back into the consolidated fund. So I don't know, maybe we need to sit again and look at the legislation and interpret it, or maybe go to court for an interpretation. I don't think it's the, Mr. Dr. Shaw, I don't think it's the citizen or the institution that is complaining that should enforce your own orders. Your own orders should be enforced. In fact, that's why you have the powers of the court. You have the powers of all types of powers. Force people. You can even force and enter into buildings. If you look at the act, right? You can order the arrest of people who failed. So you have enormous powers to enforce your own judgment, which should not be pushed on to citizens. Right. But if, for example, we went to the commission imposed fines against Ministry of Health, and Ministry of Health refused, we can go to court to enforce, not to enforce your orders, but to ensure that the court order now is given for the ministry to give us the information which we want. Now, your orders, your fines are almost the position of the court. If the ministry is dissatisfied with that, they now go to the court to overturn it. That's my understanding. And that's my understanding of what has obtained in other jurisdictions from whom we copy that.
Right.
But the most important point is, I think the essential problem we're having is, one, the Right to Access Information Commission needs to, they need to stamp out their own authority, which I think Dr. Shaw and his people have not done. Now, you are not an apron around the waist of public institutions. They should be afraid of you, like really afraid of you. When you show up, they should know that, oh, these guys have come. I need to comply.
And
or when you write a letter, until you do that, we're going to have this situation where institutions like the Ministry of Health is going to just discard what you say, right? That's the first point. The second point is more citizens have to make requests and test the system and go to Right to Access Information, go to these MDAs, because most of the MDAs have PROs who are just PROs. information officers.
Right.
There should be two parts of their function. One is actually organizing and archiving information and receiving requests and giving them out, apart from just writing press releases or placing adverts in newspapers. That's the reason why when the access to information law says every MDA should have an information officer or a department that deals with it. So the point is that the Right to Access Information Commission needs to stamp its authority. You have all the powers that you need to ensure that the MDAs. I do understand one thing though. You guys are suffering from financial issues. You don't get money. You are like every other institution that is fighting for your subvention. And I think this is the thing. This is something that you need to sit down with the Ministry of Finance and have a conversation with them. But also it's something you need to sit down with some donor organizations, because part of the law says you can fundraise outside of the government subvention. Because in all fairness to the state, the government has to fund every other institution. So the little they give to you is what you have to thrive on. But if you're fundraising, like long-term funding, then this will help you really do what you do. But your independence is critical.
Let me bring in Ahmed. It is very crucial. I know what we go through, for example, as journalists, we try to access certain information, we reach out to certain people. I have reached out to some ministries asking for certain things. Even the ministers are not willing to come out. They're not even willing to talk to you. Requesting certain information. And this is crucial, because when we need facts. To do our stories, to publish, to broadcast. And when those facts are hidden, we cannot access them. Then at the end of the day, we are seen as reckless people. We are seen as irresponsible practitioners, and that creates a whole different definition for about who journalists are. So where does that put us now? The failure of institutions complying, and when there is actually a law telling them to give the information to these guys.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yes, that is a big challenge. But let me start by commending take this opportunity to commend Mustafa Abdullah, who has been a pioneer of this freedom of information law. And he has also been supporting the media in most of our programs, trying to defend journalists, defend their human rights, defend their freedom to express and to publish. And also, she has also been supporting the repeal process.
Right.
One of the leading organizations that have done that. So I think we should commend him for that and sort of thing. And if I go to answer, let me just go back to some of the issues that we have raised.
Go ahead.
There is a provision for penalties in the Act. And I remember the Bank of you find the Bank of Salon. Bank of Sierra Leone, with related to a case that Mata Kagbo filed. They refused to comply. They refused to provide the information, and then you guys find them. What is the situation with that case now?
Yeah, well, the Bank of Sierra Leone, they appealed.
I understand they have appealed.
And the matter is still in court. So it's something
so people should be afraid of you. Institutions should be afraid like they are afraid of the ECC. That's the same.
For the Ministry of Health team, I wanted to come in, but I will allow you to finish first.
Yes. I'm happy that the Bank of Sierra Leone is paying a lawyer to go to court to appeal. It means that they are complying with the law and they're following the law and they're paying someone. It's taxpayers' money for which they should be held to account.
Exactly.
Why didn't you release this information at that point in time? So you
have to be
quiet.
Then there's also the excuse they made about the information officers. And I think there's a provision also in the law that says every department, every MDA should have an information officer. Has that been done?
Well,
because I remember the Minister of Information was trying to recruit.
That we conducted for 2020, only out of the 20 that completed the survey, only 15 actually showed that they have a public information officer.
Stationed.
The 5, yes, stationed.
Because it is open secrets that we have, strategic communications guys attached to six, seven
those are not public information officers. I understand the Minister of Information was in the process of recruiting this information. I don't know how far they've gone. That's why if we had the minister here, we'll have some light on that. And then there's no excuse saying that they do not sit at management level. No, that is not their job. Their job is to facilitate the process, receive the information from the public or the journalists, and then they approach the relevant professionals within the ministry or within the MD to provide the information.
Right.
So that's not excuse.
It should be the gateway.
It should be the gateway. They should facilitate. And how many people know that you can also apply in Creole? You can apply in any language you want to apply. Yes. So there is a lot of public education that we need to do because people don't understand. That's why when you see testing, if people don't know, they won't test it. They won't test the commission. Even for journalists, you can apply for information even by text messages. It is the duty of the information officer to put that down in writing and submit to the institution to come up with the course. So like you said, it's a challenge for us for the professional journalists because access to information is our work depends on access to information. To the degree to which we can investigate, the degree to which we can put out correct information, depends on how the access we have to the public information, and I think that is a challenge, and that is where because if you don't do that, then we begin to speculate. And when we speculate, that's where the problem comes in.
So there is something I want to add on this. There's some important component. The information officers who are appointed at the MDAs are not supposed to be junior officers.
Exactly.
They're supposed to be at senior level.
At senior level because they will know.
It should be at the
They
level
should have
of
institutional memory. Yeah, exactly.
Level. So that they know able everything. To take decisions on behalf of the organization. That's what the act says. And this is something that we need compliance on. You cannot just recruit information officers and dump them in the offices where they have no power to actually issue orders and do things that have to do. Because that's what the law says.
Yes. No, that's
the problem.
That's the situation we're having.
So, the easiest part.
So that's why at the RAIC we are conducting a lot of training, for the public information officers, to really bring them up to speed. During some of these training sessions, some of these issues have been coming up. I'm sure
officers from the MDAs,
have they been recruited?
Some of these issues have been coming up. They will say that they are not in a management position when they say
that is no excuse. That is no excuse.
So, but we are finding a way of addressing that. We are finding a way of addressing that. That's why recently we decided to up our game in terms of the consultation. We started holding consultations with the ministries, and all the sectors that are under those ministries. And so far we have held consultative meetings with 11 ministries, So we are making progress in that regard. I just wanted to come in a little on the Ministry of Health scenario. They actually responded after the fine was, after our order, and they sent the information to the requester. And so from our own end, we met and looked at it and said, okay, for now, let us wait to see what will be the reaction of the requester, because they only responded, they only provided the information after our order, after the fine. So in that situation, in consultation, because we had a meeting with our legal, and we were advised, we decided collectively, because there was a meeting and we discussed it. It came up, and we said, okay, let us wait to see what will be the move from the SDI, whether that response is sufficient or not, before we go to the step of
that itself is a violation of the law. Let me be very clear on that. You waiting for I think we should not be intimidated. We should not be timid about enforcing this law.
Yes, exactly.
If you as a regulator, you are hesitant to take the next step. I can tell you exactly what the law says, if I remember well. It says your failure to provide information within the timeline is deemed as a failure. So that means you already have committed the offense.
Right.
You cannot wait for us to take action when you are the regulator. They have failed. They knew they were supposed to provide.
So the commission should have acted already.
The fine which they had imposed must be enforced.
Right.
You understand?
Because they have the power of enforcement.
Yes, they should enforce. The Ministry of Health is supposed to pay because you have. This is the reason. Let me tell you, when we were drafting the law, it was 5 days for them to comply. It was pushed to 7 days. It's pushed to 15 days.
Right.
Half a month.
That's a lot.
Now you have half a month of a working day to comply. If you decided not to comply, then out of willfulness, in fact the act says where you willfully or intentionally, then you have violated the law. You should not, I think you should enforce, the Ministry of Health is supposed to pay. That's what it is.
Would I be safe to question the efficiency and effectiveness of the commission at this point? Because it appears, I mean, you're just there, just like any other institution. Just, I mean, yes, we are existing, but nothing is being done to actually get.
Well, the fact that we've started, because this is the first time we've issued orders, 2 orders, and one is being challenged now in court. I think it's a big step.
Based on the institution that is involved,
we under, I mean, the circumstances are very challenging.
Yeah, very challenging.
Right.
We have a very limited capacity, staff capacity. It's only recently they have just approved for us to hire another 6. Since we came, we have had departures and no arrivals, and we only have 1 lawyer. Can you imagine the whole commission? And that lawyer is not only covering here at the National Secretariat, but also the regions. And so, I mean, sometimes
outsource.
Yes,
they don't have the money. They don't have the money to pay.
That's why you see. I mean, it's really challenging, but we are trying. We are operating.
Choose not to answer this, but if you choose, go ahead.
Yeah. So
do you see the action?
Do you say that we are not efficient? I think will be too much.
You should ask me.
Just say maybe we need to. Let him not assess himself. Maybe if you say we need to do more.
Do you see that as a deliberate attempt to actually keep you, I mean, handicapped not to perform well?
Well, that is why when we are conducting this, or when we are participating in the survey as to the compliance, one of the questions we are advised choose not to answer. Yeah, one of the questions that come up normally is whether we are getting enough financial support. To, you know, for the past 3 years now, we have been participating in that survey, UNESCO survey. And in that, we have been providing the amount that we have been receiving from government. We have been asking for more, but we have always been giving very limited. I will be very
You work within that. You work within that. Let me say something to that.
Okay.
That is a challenge. That is a challenge.
I can say it here. I can say it for free here. For the past 3 years, we've been asking for more money, but we've been giving, in fact, even below what we have been asking. I mean, far below.
So you've been held hostage, and you should not be blamed for your ineffectiveness.
That is a challenge. That is a challenge. That's why in a symposium last week on democracy, deepening democracy in Sierra Leone, the prospect, and I mentioned them. I mean, these are important democratic institutions. Right to Access Information Commission, the IMC, the Audit Service, the ACC,
right,
the NATCOM. Those are the institutions. These are all
governance
important democratic institutions. And then they don't set them up. And they establish them and then set them up to fail by starving them of the necessary funds and necessary resources. So it's a big challenge for them until we begin to not look at them, set them up as scarecrows. Definitely, they will not be doing anything. So
a couple of things. Okay. So a couple of things. One. Right to Access Information Commission has been starved since its inception. When President Ernest Bai Koroma appointed UNISA and others, you see that they were housed in the Ministry of Information's conference hall. That's where they worked for almost a year without salary. And I think this is not correct, right? Institutions like Right to Access Information, like my colleague said, are so pivotal that it's not just the money that is coming from the consolidated funds. Other institutions like the Public Finance Management, the budget people need to understand that this organization or this institution is pivotal to our work. Right. Because even when we are clamoring, and this is the point, we clamor for international benchmarks. Now, when you look at the U.S. State Department report, no information on budget, no information on contract. So if the Public Finance Management Department that is getting money from World Bank, it's not putting aside funding for right to access information, then they will not meet that benchmark.
Because if they are not complying in the first place.
Yes, exactly. They are not complying. But the point is, there are two sides of this. The first thing, if you work in public service, the commission has to find more lobbying skills for funding. For you to get money from finance, if you understand, you have to go there, you have to talk to people, you have to talk to the budget people, you have to, it's part of your work to raise funds. The money is not going to come, you know, on a silver platter for you. You have to go out to look for it. You have to find partner organizations, like I said, the PFMU, the Public Financial Management Unit, They have funding on governance. Ministry of Finance have a PFMU department. You need to talk to them. They defeat the World Bank, the EU people. These are institutions that are funding transparency and accountability in various sectors, including mining, the extractive industry transparency. Because when you look at what you spoke about in your introduction, it says contract. Right. Contract with mining companies. Contract between mining companies and individuals.
It's a public document.
These are public institutions that should be out there. And without proper funding for the Right to Access Information Commission. But what I wanted to actually end up with before you move on is 2 orders in 3 years, Dr. Shaw, it's not enough. It's not closer to enough. It actually means way below performance. Like you said, if you ask 1 billion and they give you 300,000, way below. But for the commission to have issued only 2 orders, that is really, really disappointing. And I will tell you, SDI is doing a report assessing everything, including right to access information, which will release on the 28th. And it's pointing to some of these issues, some of the challenges. And you need, maybe if I say this here on your behalf, it will help. You need to let finance understand, you need to let the financial secretary and the team understand that you have offices across the country that are not functional because you don't have staff. We have gone to those offices, they are shut down. Now, apart from the fact that you are stifling the organization, you take funding from government or from donors, you rent an office and it's locked. You're wasting resources. So these are things that we need to begin to point out in order for you to be efficiently there and operating so that we can have this law implemented.
All right, we actually crafted a topic around ways in which we can use access to information to curb corruption, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. And I just want to bring you in, but as I bring you, let me just quickly take, let me just go through an excerpt from what the U.S. State Department put out in its 2021 Fiscal Transparency Report, especially on Sierra Leone. It says, during the review period, the government's budget and information on debt obligations, with the exception of state-owned enterprise debt, were widely and easily accessible to the public, including online. The budget was substantially complete and generally reliable. The Supreme Audit Institution meets international standards of independence. It reviewed the government's account and made its reports publicly available. Now, the process for allocating licenses and contracts for natural resource extraction was outlined in law, but not followed in practice. So basic information on natural resource extraction awards was not publicly available. So now, what they are now saying is that Sierra Leone's fiscal transparency would be enhanced by disclosing state-owned enterprise debts, following in practice procedures for awarding natural resource extraction contracts, and making basic information on natural resource extraction awards publicly available. And these are the things we need to report. So on a normal day, a journalist would write an article that 500 billion contract has been awarded to so-and-so company, but you have 30% of 10% kickbacks to so-and-so, and governments would question that article, but the contract itself would never surface, would never come to light. I mean, for people to know what is really in that, and that is critical in our practice.
Those are public documents. Those are public and according to the Act, those documents should be made public.
Exactly.
Proactive disclosure. These are simple things. These are normal. How you do invitations for tender. How you award contracts. Your expenditure, your revenue and expenditure. These are things that should be there. You should not wait for the public to ask, or for a journalist to ask. Okay, you know these are public documents, and you know you are an MDA and you are providing the public service, and you are acting. And one thing they should know is that they should know that the information is not the property of the government. It is the people's. The people own the information. The government or the MDAs are just holding it on behalf of the people. So they should know that until we do some kind of public education for even the MDAs, not just for us, for the citizens and for journalists, but even for the MDAs to be able to respect the Right to Access Information Commission, respect the provision. Respect is an act of parliament. It's a legislation.
And if we don't respect,
they should comply. If they don't respect, then we don't.
If we don't respect our laws, if you don't respect it,
who should respect it? Foreigner will come and respect it.
Now you spoke about issues. I know that, for example, the National Public Procurement Authority is one institution that has a very proactive website. They put out contracts, they put out agreements and stuff. They're doing excellent work. But guess what? What the minister said the Minister of Finance grumbles. It's not our co-write this. The Minister of Finance grumbles that procurement is becoming a disaster in the management of our economy.
Right.
That's the Minister of...
Yes, even the audit service mentioned that.
Yes, because
all the problems we're having with the finance, the procurement.
What is being advertised, the bidding process, how transparent it is. As much as the NPPA is trying its level best to do what it should do of these things, it's becoming a disaster, which means there are a lot of problems in the public service when it comes to fiscal management. And this is something that right to access information, the implementation will be able to solve. If you cannot obey the law, then you have nothing to rely on, really. And one of the things that I think I have to emphasize, no institution is above the law.
Right.
Not finance themselves, not health, not Bank of Sierra Leone. If the law, the right to access information says you should release information within 15 days, and people come to you, you should release that information. You are not exempt from releasing the information. The exemption of releasing information is already in the Act. You must fall within the category. If you don't, then you must release the information. Otherwise, you should be able to pay the fines that is required.
The issue of being open, like open governance, openness, and moving away from this culture of secrecy. Does not only help us, the journalists or the citizens, but also the government. Because when you have a good program, a good system in place, then government will have will keep records. Every MD will have a system where they keep records and archive records, and then every decision that government takes will be informed by factual information, not discretional information. So,
and that's what Senga has been saying. Data.
The
data comes from
even the open data. Yes, even the open data. You go online, you can't access data. You cannot access any data on Salon, except for the Minister of Education who are doing some work in that area. So how do you do your work as a journalist, as a journalist? How do you do your work? What facts do you have to put in your story to ensure that you put out a story that is balanced, that is fact-based?
There is one other thing which you need to talk about, is how independent the Right to Access Information Commission is. This is something that
that is something definitely I would have to question. We have to question that in this conversation. That is something we have to question in this conversation. But Dr. Shaw, in all of what we're discussing, I mean, you're coming very integral to ensuring that, I mean, openness in the governance system, transparency. I mean, these are features that can be achieved if you are effective, if you are robust in the way you go about even the implementation of the very act that brought you to force. So outside financial challenge, outside human resource challenge, what else would you want to look at? Because these are things outside government. You can outsource funds to perhaps help you go on with your programs. What else would you want to point at as a major challenge crippling you?
Well, I think we've touched on almost everything. The culture of security, the reluctance on the part of public authorities to come forward, and release information when that information is requested for. I mean, the problem, that reluctance is something we have been trying to see how best, because I remember there was a meeting that we had with the Vice President, and also we've held meetings with also the Minister of Planning and Economic Development, to how best in terms of compliance, to make sure that ATI is included as one of the performance indicators, for performing MDs. For instance, when they are preparing a report, as part of the medium-term development, responding to the medium-term development plan, to what extent, ATI, can be factored in as a performance indicator, I mean, which is very key, because access to information is very important. For instance, look at the VNR. We participated for the first time. RAIC. I think we have good stories to tell, actually. We are invited to contribute to the VNR report, the Voluntary National Review. And the survey that we conducted revealed that out of 144 cases for the 2020 period, 132 were successful. So you can see, although we are having challenges, maybe we have not issued a lot of orders, as Mr. Abdullahi put it, only 2 orders. But I think the fact that we are there, for instance, just after the training that we did with journalists, we witnessed a spike. You know, the training we did with those 50 journalists.
Yes, we need to do more. Yeah, we need to do more. We need to do more of that. We need to do more of that.
A spike in the number of cases.
Yeah.
You know, from newspapers, you know, journalists coming forward and ask and making requests. And to be honest with you,
and the institutions have done
no, but there is a high rate, there is a very low rate of compliance.
Yeah,
very low rate of compliance. Because I talked to
them. Has been encouraging somehow. There are some few cases, some few challenges, but after our interventions, for instance, when we are asked to review the cases, you know, most of the time, the public authorities have responded. You know, most of the time. Look at, for instance, not too long ago, the media leaks. I think there is one organization called Independent Media Leaks. You know, they requested for information regarding Mano River, you know, the delegation that visited Mano River from, you know, and there was some money spent, you know, and they asked for how those funds were expended, and Ministry of Planning and Economic Development responded, you know, following our you know, so what I'm saying, and also if you look at the SDI case, SDI made request to 5 MDAs, and 4 of them complied. You know,
that is just one case. Matakabo made 22 requests after the Bank of Salon. None has been complied with.
We are talking about funds received
just one case.
from NACOVAC. How, you know, the simple question, give an explanation how those funds were expended.
So
some of the MDAs responded positively, but just one, Minister of Health. But our Minister of Health, we issued the fine. We did not sit down and just allow them to get away with it.
There are two sides.
Yeah, the focus is not defined.
There are two sides.
The focus will not be defined. The focus will not be defined. We don't want fines or penalties. We want them to release the information.
No, we understand that. No, we understand that. But there are two sides to your function.
But I think we are making progress. I think we are making progress.
There are two sides to your function, which is one is the soft approach, which is training, building capacity, and the harder approach. Now, when this law was being made, the conversations that were ongoing, are we going to have another toothless legislation? And we said no. So we created the law to have this soft and hard approach. If you use all the soft approach, and you're talking about, now let's go back to history, or let's go back in history. The only way you change attitude and behavior is by enforcing laws. From Germany to the US to everywhere. If you don't enforce the law, where there is a deterrence effect, where people will know that the law will bite me. I keep saying this. I asked someone, I was on a panel the other day somewhere, and somebody talked about it. So I asked him, and this was in Washington. I said to him, why you not bring your motor car from Maryland in Campak and a treat in Washington, D.C.? He said, because of Clamper. Yes, because there's an enforcement mechanism. Yeah, people take their vehicle and park everywhere on the street here, right? So conversation about changing attitude, changing the culture of secrecy, about how best we enforce legislations that have enforcement ability, right? Again, I sympathize with you. I'm very close to the commission, and I see how you struggle. But I also feel you should much more be forthcoming and clamping down on institutions. We at SDI, no matter who it is, who you are, when we want to go after information, we go after the information. Now, normally, corruption is really high, it's very high in emergencies. And this is not the first time we've done it. During Ebola, we put out requests for information to MDAs, including, what was it called, the Secretariat, where Major Paulo and others, when the president was working. Whatever it was called. We put in information and asked them, how are you spending the billions that the state was putting? Later on, we were vindicated when the audit report came and found out that corruption was ripe in that sector. Those who work there.
Exactly, that's the idea.
Yes. So when Corona started, the same thing we did during Ebola was write to them and say, we want to know how you're spending money, the monies that you receive for Corona response. And if you don't comply as ministry, it means there's something you're hiding. For us, that's the first impression we have. You have to comply because that's what citizens want to know. You receive 10 billion, how are you expending the money? Did you buy mattresses? Did you provide food for people who are in quarantine? Did you? All of these things are things that push people's lives. So that's what we do. And I expect, again, like I said, 3 in 3 years. Okay, 1 per year. Okay, that's not a good statistics. That's not at all.
They will increase.
While I sympathize with you, and I you know I sympathize with them. We've been working together, trying to help. One of the major problems that we have in Zambia is the regulation. Doc did not mention it. The law says that the government, the Ministry of Information, and the Right to Access Information Commission should pass a regulation that would properly lead to the enforcement and implementation of the law.
Right.
Now, since 2013, that regulation has not been passed. We as civil society, we drafted the regulation. We gave it to government when UNICEF and others were there. They've worked on it. They've reviewed it. It's ready. Why that regulation is seated there and not passed in Parliament still baffles all of us. We've had meetings with the Commission, we've had meetings with the Ministry, and we've had plans to sit down and push that. That regulation needs to be passed.
Yes, let's start another
And that's
campaign. And we don't need to wait for audit service to come for audit before these MDAs or these institutions bring out the information. It should be prompt.
The regulations are actually
so that the media will have got access to it.
A lot.
All right.
And the regulations, they are with everything, the reviews have been done. The law officers
let's start the campaign for that now. Let's start the campaign.
That
is very important. This is very
the Ministry
important
of Information and Communication.
for
The regulation is
made
made
several.
Regulation is
We've made several
1
representations.
days after it comes into effect.
Now,
Engage the Ministry of Information.
No, we are going. I'm going
Let them
to
table this. Let them table this.
Sit down
And
with the ministry, because the ministry says, from what the ministry told us, that they have not been properly briefed on the regulations. Now, the Right to Access Information Commission is saying something else. Now, you could see that there is a disconnect. There is something that
we're going to look into that.
Yes.
But, I mean, my attention has just been drawn to something very critical. Here is a message from one of our followers on Facebook. And the message is saying every MDA should be able to prevent very sensitive information that protects their institution's security from being disclosed. For example, a bank should not disclose all modalities that they have in place to prevent credit card theft.
That's not what they
Nobody's asking for that. Since doing so will expose them to massive financial loss. And what that brings to mind, let me just read a provision in the National Security and Central Intelligence Act of 2002. Section 4, subsection 2, A is saying, subsection, let me read 2.4, is saying, without prejudice to the generality of subsection 1, it should be the responsibility of the Council to consider and take appropriate measures to safeguard the internal and external security of Sierra Leone, be saying to ensure the gathering of information relating to the security of Sierra Leone and the integration of domestic and foreign security policies so as to enable the country services and other departments and agencies of government to cooperate more effectively in matters relating to national security. Here is a question, that I want to ask, and the council, which shared powers, constitutes Office of the Vice President. This is very interesting. Finance Minister, Minister of Information, Deputy Minister of Finance, Head of the Military, and the Inspector General of Police. And meetings are held under the chairmanship of the President. This is quite interesting. So, in a situation where pieces of information are being denied, and that can be attributed to, it constitutes threat to national security. Let's put it that way. And when almost all of the laws did not actually tell or give specifics as to what really constitute national threats or threat to national security, but these include espionage, sabotage, foreign activities detrimental to the interest of Sierra Leone, and violence against person or property, for the purpose of achieving a political objective within Sierra Leone or the foreign state. Let's look at it this way. In a situation where I would want to publish an article against, say, a corruption article against the Ministry of Defense, for example. And at the end of the day, I have to go to court because, it will be seen as, this constitutes a threat against national security. And I have to go to court to defend that. And it is this very court who would then have to determine that this is in the interest of the public and does not constitute or form part of threats to national security. How does that pan out at the end of the day for us? Especially us journalists, Emmanuel. Since you are very much synonymous to, I don't know if it's CSO or the media, but let's put it that way.
So here's the thing. The state has a responsibility to protect national security.
Right.
Even the right to access information provides in section 15 that, national security is a paramount, right? However, national security is not a blank check.
Right.
National security is assessed on a case-by-case basis. So information from, okay, let me take the worst-case scenario. Chernobyl gets information from the government department, however he gets it. Now, you would think that these are so sensitive that there will be disruption or national crisis. Has there been any national crisis since he started publishing? No.
And those are documents that should be public.
No, yes.
And those are documents that should be public.
That should be public. Now, what you be saying? Information like financial transactions, financial information.
Those are not national security threats.
The things that they are talking about, like the example of the message from credit card fraud and credit card theft, determines and undermines national economy. This is something that no one will go to the bank and say, give me information on credit card, right? Nobody goes in and say, give me information on the strength of our arms and ammunition in Sierra Leone. Government should not give you that. But if there is corruption in the military and the rank and file are not getting their ration or their salary, which is paid by Ministry of Finance, now that's an information that citizens should get, because what will happen, the effect of cleaning up that corruption is that there will be a stronger military. Let me give you a recent example. There are two things that I saw very recently, where the Ministry of Finance said they are going to stop subsidies for about 53 schools who bloated their numbers in terms of the number of students that are supposed to be taking the public exam. Now, you would think that's sensitive, yes, but it's going to help save money, it's going to help the educational system. So information is not just looked at and you blank it and say it's national security. We've moved away from that stage. Forget about the right to access information law, right? The National Public Procurement Act has extensive provision on access to information on procurement. Forget about right to access information law. The Local Government Act has extensive provision on access to information. Forget about right to access to information. The Public Finance Management Act and the Financial Act every year has extensive provision on the release of access to information. So we've moved as a democratic
But with all
state.
those laws, I mean, it's not happening.
Yeah, well, that's why we need to enforce it. This is why I'm saying
It's the enforcement, yes. Exactly. Let me just add to that. Yes. And so, for example, for the military, if you want to investigate the procurement of arms, that is a national security. that is national security. So, so you see, even in America, following the September 11 incident, they passed laws. They have the Patriot Act, they have the Homeland Security Act. These are national security acts, but to use them in the pretext of preventing disclosure of information, that is wrong. So we should not use national security as a pretext to hold back information or subvert the provision of public information. So those documents Children is getting, people's salary, these are public documents. They should be in the public domain. I should have access to it as a journalist. I should request for it and have it. So it's not any huge investigative work. It's just because we are holding this document and then somebody wants to read and they think that is an investigative work. No, it's a public document. The MDAs or the institutions have the legal authority, they have the legal obligation to provide this information to the public.
And in fact, these are information that falls within the proactive disclosure.
Disclosure, exactly.
If you look at Section 8, A to Q, it says, as a public institution, you should publish who works for you.
Thank you.
Their official phone numbers, the grade in which you pay them.
You pay them,
if
exactly.
you're paying me, if I am deputy secretary and my salary range is this, you should put it. Not my exact name and my salary, but the range.
Grade B,
grade B, grade C, you should be, So what this basically explains is that if I am working as a grade C person, and then I have a Range Rover, I have a bigger house, government and citizens will now say this is unexplained wealth. Where are you getting the money from when you're not earning it?
Because they don't know.
It
they don't know you're earning it.
prevents corruption.
Exactly.
You understand? It does prevent corruption, that
Right.
proactive disclosure. So for us to begin to think that, so sometimes I see this conversation about, these are this, I'm like, no, I mean, it's just because we are not respecting the law. Some of the information that are being put out there, I mean, I like freedom of the press. I like the journalists. I know that the Africanist press, I'm not a big fan of the Africanist press, but I don't see what legal wrong that is happening to Sierra Leone, what crisis it has caused. What Africanist press has done is to generate conversation on how public funds are being
spent. Exactly. These are public funds.
This is normal,
right?
It's normal. It's some conversation that we should be having.
Everything we've talked about goes back to the Right to Access Information Commission. The legal entity. what then comes to mind has to do with the independence of the institution. I mean, are you free from political interference, or are you being remotely controlled what to do, what not to do? I will allow you to answer last.
You can choose not to answer. You can choose.
I just wanted to intervene a bit on the
conversation right now. Okay, this conversation.
Defense team,
Yes.
security team. Just to add to what Mr. Abdullahi and Monk said, the exempt provisions are there.
Right.
It's very clear, you know. Just that there is what we call the public interest tests. That is section 12, subsection 2. Provides that if the information that is going to be disclosed, if the public interest in disclosing that information outweighs the harm in, you know, kind of releasing that information,
Right.
then it is a public interest that will really prevail.
Yes.
You know, so and that negotiating that balance is where the commission comes in. Because if there is a disagreement between the requester and the public authority, you know, they will have to refer to the commission, and then we'll come in and interpret. You know, of course, public interest is very key. How do you interpret public interest? I mean, public interest, you know, is very key. If you are going to provide, you are going to disclose information, it should be in the public interest. But if it is going to be harmful to the public interest, then of course, it should not be released. But one thing that we have to remember also is that is why Section 26 also provides that in a situation where the information, for instance, if it is military information, and you know, and part of that information is not actually sensitive, for instance, it can be redacted. For instance, if it is something that is going to hold a particular senior military officer to account for corruption-related cases, then that information can be redacted and released without necessarily jeopardizing national security. So Section 26
So thank you
you
for putting my question into context. Into context, the question about the independence of the commission. So I'm just looking now at a scenario, him submitting that Section 12, subsection 2. I mean, there are things that they can actually exempt and see if it outweighs the harm, if public interest outweighs the harm that would cause, and they would have to come in as referee to determine. But if the referee is being officiated by some stronger arms, how does that pan out?
Well, that was a question that you have. Do you want to be excused from answering that?
No, definitely. I mean, I will answer that question.
Go ahead.
As far as we are concerned at the commission, we're independent, you know, and definitely. We are doing our best.
Is it by law or in practice?
I mean, in practice as well.
Okay.
In practice, because
In law
don't
and in
forget,
practice.
we have issued orders recently, not so. We have issued orders.
3 orders.
And we are not invited to State House, for instance, and you know, and told to.
That's good to know.
To withdraw. You know what I mean? We
Yeah.
are not invited to State House. I mean, we did that, and we interpreting the law. And by implementing the law, you know, and of course there were a few, you know, I can say concerns expressed in some quarters.
And calls were placed.
And calls were made to you.
Yeah. No, well, not the. Well, I can. Well, I mean,
Don't mention those who
just
called.
that. I mean, we are kind of questions. In Creole, but you guys, never mind. But I mean, at the end of the day, we needed to set example. We needed to set a kind of an example, you know, to tell the public authorities that we can also move from using the carrot, you know, to the stick. We have been using the carrot a lot, and we prefer using the carrot because we are also a government institution. But if it comes to the situation where we have to really use the stick, we will use it, and we have demonstrated it. Maybe we have not been perfect in using the stick.
Okay.
But we think the fact that the Bank of Sierra Leone, for instance, has taken us to court, you know, appeal court,
Challenging
you
the
know, it
decision.
means, you know, I think we are doing the right thing.
All right, let's allow the two to actually comment on that question, the independence
So
and
here's
power
the,
play.
here's the issue. So when you talk about
It's
independence
just
can I finish? Doc, when you talk about independence of institutions, there are several components. So
Right.
independence of personnel, yes. You have the commission hire their own staff. The commissioners are appointed by the president and approved by parliament. Financial autonomy, they don't have. So that's not an independence that you think.
That's where the challenge is.
That's a major problem. Even as we speak, their entire legislative legal framework has not been completed because the regulation has not been passed. And we've been pushing for that regulation to be passed. Now, the third point is, and I think we need to talk about this, what is the relationship, or what ought to be the relationship between the Right to Access Information Commission and the Line Ministry?
And the Ministry of Information.
The Ministry of Information. Now, if you understand the Sierra Leone governance architecture, you realize that commissions are not created on their own, not even the ACC or the audit. They have a line ministry where they are attached to, right? Because at the end of the day, your budget goes through the line ministry. You want to pass a regulation, you go to the line ministry. You want your law to be passed, you go to the line ministry. But that is as far as it goes. That at the end of the year, you do your report, you give to the minister is under an obligation to put it before parliament. You have your budget, you give to the minister. Now, the ministry should not have any control of the daily happenings at the Right to Access Information Commission. This is something that I think we need to hammer home. Like NATCOM, like IMC, like Right to Access Information Commission, while they are strong to the Ministry of Information, they are supposed to be, maybe not NATCOM, they are supposed to be independent organizations.
In their operations.
What they do, if you look at the Act, it's very clear that in the conduct of their business, they are not subject to the control of any authority or any person. You understand? So this is something that we need to drive home, and they need to understand themselves. So
with the type of political culture in Sierra Leone, is that really?
It is feasible. I mean, what is wrong with access to information? Except the fact that maybe you and your minister are not seeing eye to eye. You meet once a year. That's okay. That's fine. But really, you don't really have to go and answer to him every day. You don't have to answer to him every other day, because actually you go to work. At the end of the year, you do your report. Now, for example, you want a regulation passed. That regulation has to be taken to the ministry. Whatever, I mean, Doc, I have said this in your absence, and I want to say this. I always say to people, if I want that wristwatch, monkey in hand, I find a way and get it. Even if monkey is throwing water at me, I find a way and get it. Because I know how important that is. You want something from the Ministry of Information, go get it. Get your regulation passed, get your work framework in place. When your report is ready, it's your ministry. Go and talk to them where our report is ready. But at the same time, the ministry have to understand that they have limitations on how much they also interface and interfere with their work.
Yeah, so it goes back to the relationship they have with the line ministry. Yes, we've already established that they are autonomous. According to the Act, they are an independent body established, appointed, the chairman appointed nominated by the president, and then parliament vets. And then they go, and then you employ all the other officers, eh? You have the ability, you have the power to employ other people. So they are independent.
And also the budget, we have our own budget.
Yes.
We don't go through
the ministry.
Just that, of course, during the budget presentation, all the sectors under the Ministry of Information,
IMC, right, exactly. So the only independent to have is the finance. How would they get the money from finance?
Finance is very, very limited. So maybe to help us, our independence, the government really needs to consider, increasing our ceiling, because we've been.
But you also need to think outside the box. You don't have to depend on government. This is a public institution, and it's very important to our democracy.
But that just speaks
and it's
to
important to everything, to justice, to the rule of law, to the economy, to trade, to everything.
We have been getting a lot of support from
the media as well.
The World Bank, and the thing is, there are certain things that they don't normally support. For instance, capacity building. Other things, they shy away. There are certain things that they shy away from. Like the World Bank, they have been supporting the Commission mostly on open data, open data and to some extent records management, the programs and so forth. I mean, to be fair to them, PMFICP, through the PMFICP, they have been doing a lot. In fact, without them, this commission would have really ceased to really exist. Because to be honest, without the World Bank funding, but they cannot do everything.
Right.
There are certain things. For instance, look at look at this Universal Access to Information Day on Tuesday. You know, this is something that we are this normally is something that is from the government allocation. You know, but you know, so we have some other activities like popularization that is supposed to be supported from the government allocation. But the government allocation that we are getting is just barely enough to take care of the running costs, operational costs like fuel. So you know, it's barely enough. So it's like it's not easy at all. So we have to go the extra mile to even appeal to the donors. But they shy away from some of these other activities, some of these other areas. It's not easy.
All right.
Like popularization.
Let me take some.
Popularization is very key.
What is the relationship?
Popularization of the law is very key.
It's very key.
Yes, for journalists,
for citizens, and for the community.
You know, so more and more people are supposed to be aware that the law is there and we are there.
So what is your relationship with the ministry, with the Minister of Information?
Well,
the minister and this sort of thing.
Well, the relationship, we don't have a bad relationship. Okay. We have a good relationship. It's just that
I'm the moderator, I'm the chairman.
It's just that I have to be honest that in terms of helping us with the policy side, because
they should be supporting you. They should be supporting you. They should be supporting you.
So when we try very hard to put, complete all the other processes and procedures in terms of like the regulations.
That is the
regulations. There was a validation exercise.
Can I make a clarity here? Okay.
You were there, not so
Nazila, Mr. President, we all need to step up.
Yes, no, definitely.
Sit with the ministry and
going forward. These are some of the things that
maybe I need the help of you guys.
Mr. Doc,
you have to come in.
Doc, please. I have been trying in the last 6 months. We need to come up, have a conversation with them so we can move that regulation.
Yes.
There is a stalemate somewhere.
Yes, we need to do that.
Disagreement about something. That relationship is not as rosy, as smooth as he's trying to present it. There is something, but I don't want to go into the details here. I want to call on the ministry, we want to call on you, that we all need to simmer down and so that we can move the process forward.
For us, we don't think that is a disagreement. The only thing is that the ministry also, I think they have a lot to do, so sometimes we are taking off the radar.
Let's bring in our viewers.
We'll engage you guys. We'll bring you guys.
Sometimes they forget because we don't have money.
Let's take some messages and see if we can accommodate.
We are treated like SNATCOM.
And see if we can accommodate some calls. The number is 030-622-766. 030-622-766. Trust me, Samuel, Rights to Access Information Office is one of the offices among many other to be closed because they are not working according to their name. That means they are not providing relevant information to the public, especially to the citizens, because we have some government offices that need to be questioned by the public, but that is not working. And if the government of the day fails to provide information or news to the public, trust me, the public has to provide news by themselves, either good or bad, which is not good for a democratic country like Sierra Leone. From Boss LA of Duazak. Sultan Rose is saying all our leaders in Africa here are ruling us like Lannisters and they are gladiators. And the ministers, they take information from what they all get from the audience and implements them into the high extent. Okay, that's not too clear. I'm struggling with that, please. If you can resend that, I would be happy. Ambassador Mike Joseph Kanu is saying they have been politically remote controlled. There is nothing independent in that because government has to pay you guys, and what you do is to just go for these small fish and leave the big fishes floating around. Because we are dragging our feet when it comes to amending our 1991 constitution, the current status in Mama Salon will continue. Mibike is saying, Harry Mandela Yambasu is saying, I don't have time with people on, okay, that's not what we're discussing, guys. It's so interesting. There's the political conversation on Facebook and the messages are they can always be overwhelming and too much for me to actually skip through and take messages. Can we just speak to the issue that we're discussing, please? And let's forget about politics on the page. But the fact that A texter is saying, Boss Elia Dwazak is saying, when we do not have access to information, the public is left to just generate what they want to generate and feed the rest of the nation with whether good, bad, accurate, false. That's what we have to go with. So as we round up the conversation, let me start off with you, Emmanuel. What then do we need to put in place to ensure that access to information becomes part of what we do every day within our governance structure? As we go on with the governance conversation and all of that, how do we get access to information very integral within our structure?
So the first thing is, Sierra Leone is rated to have done excellently well in trying to create a transparent government. When you say this, you mean the legal framework, the legislative framework, like I mentioned from the start, is in place, the commission is in place. Now, the commission needs to push. It's the mandate of the commission to ensure that all MDAs have information officers. It's the mandate of the commission to work with the line ministries to pass the Records Management Act. That's very important, because one problem we are having, you go to MDAs, the papers are scattered all over. You ask for an information, they don't know where it is. So sometimes you also feel sorry for this public servant. But if you have a record management system, a law that mandates for records management, it will take a couple of years, but then we'll begin to put small investments into it to ensure that it works. But also, and I think Dr. Shaw was making the point, Shaka Shaw was making the point, we need to raise awareness to people to understand that information is power. And they have the right now to seek information, not just at government level, central government level, at the local government level. The Local Government Act, the Freedom of the Right to Access Information Law, these are all legislations that are talking about it. And just so that we don't even forget, I just finished a book. I just published a book on how access to information can curb corruption in Sierra Leone. And one of the things that I actually looked at is local government, interview local government officials on their reaction and the constraints that they are facing. So this is something that I think we need to do. Citizens have to demand information. The more pressure we put on MDAs, the likelihood that they will react and improve their systems. Bank of Sierra Leone is going to the Court of Appeal. Yes, they're spending money, but next time when a request comes in, they're going to sit a little bit and say, okay, let's be careful because there are consequences. Right? If Ministry of Health had the same consequences, then you have a ripple effect of that. So we should not just be talking about raising awareness. We should raise awareness. We should build infrastructures, but the courts, the judiciary, and citizens must go and ensure that they enforce those rights.
Yes. Yes, basically, I think I would love to outline the need for public education, for the public, the people to know their rights to information. That is very key, because when they know their rights to information, then they will know their democratic rights. And then they also have a role to play to hold government to account. And let the public know that they do not need to be literate to ask for information. They can ask in any language they understand, especially at the local level. You can ask in Mende, in Timini, in all the language you can understand. You see, there are people there who will be responsible to transform those questions into the right form that they will be taken to. So you see, it's very simple to make the laws. It's very simple to make the laws. That's the easiest part, to make the laws and establish the institutions. But the challenge comes with implementation and enforcement. So that's why implementation is difficult, and enforcement that is important and is the most difficult. And so I think we need to learn those things, and also to test the law, institutions. We have tried. Journalists have applied for information to and there are piles of requests, but non-compliance is very, very low. So it's very frustrating, and they need this information. So.
How do we, just quickly before you respond, both of you can have a bite. How do we, perhaps let me just predicate this question on going back to, I think the 2007 election, when the issue of the one ship rice came about. I mean, it was given, nobody knew about it until a certain head of state visited and made that pronouncement, and then people, Gaddafi. Yes, and until the late Gaddafi visited and made that pronouncement, and like, oh, so then they give one ship president, nobody know, that's how the one, and that played a crucial role in the 2007 election. That's so people get to make informed decisions when they are informed. Exactly. So how then do we get information really played? I mean, from the central level to the local level, so that people will be aware, even to make their daily choices.
So that's the consequence when you withhold information. That's one of the consequences. You should be open about the information. If they had announced or they had made it public that we have released so and so quantity from, then definitely they wouldn't have that effect. And take for example what happened to Sludge during the Ramadan.
Yeah.
Yes. If that was done in secret.
Right.
If I hadn't invited the media to come and say, okay, we are receiving this from the press secretary on behalf of the president, what will have happened?
Right.
That would have been more damaging than what exactly right. You see? So there's a responsibility on the part of every to make these things public. Whatever, because and it's also a responsibility for them to declare their interests.
Right.
Public officials declare your interests, declare your liabilities, declare your assets. These are all around access to information laws and democratic laws that people should. Because when you do that, then people will know. The public will know. Say if there is a change in your lifestyle, people will know that this is desirable, this is not.
So let me add my question.
Non-deserved.
A lot of the times, people in public offices, I'm sure a lot of people are sitting in their corners now and saying, now you want to talk, kind of things. But if you're a politician, it is in your best interest to open up the system, particularly in a globally exploding social media world that we are living, where you don't need to tell people things. They hear it. They share it.
Exactly.
It's now the government is basically chasing citizens.
Right.
You have to chase them, put information to ensure you counter misinformation, because the misinformation is out there in the public domain. And I say this to students, and it's like, it's a marketplace of ideas. I put my idea, you put yours, and someone is looking at it, they decide to buy.
Exactly.
If only what is out there is misinformation, then you as a government, you are in trouble.
You're in trouble, yes.
Just
that's what they play with.
I'm talking to some very strong government person. I said, look, you guys are still lacking behind in terms of information. I said, you're still lacking behind. It seems like you don't, as a government, you don't understand that information is key. People are putting things out there, you are not countering them, you say, oh, left them. That is settling in the electorate.
Right.
Now, people are putting misinformation. You're not countering. You say, I let them do what they want to do. That is not correct.
Damaging.
As a government,
you put
you
all the
have
correct
people you
information.
pay who are supposed to be countering this, going after that information and putting the things that you do, even just the little bits and pieces that you do in country. Education, you could see what David Sanger does with the education ministry. Everything he does is everywhere. You could see few ministries are doing that, but not everyone. So the government information hub has to understand that if you don't put information out, you're in trouble. And let's say, for example, Africanist Press is releasing something and you think it's a lie. Put a counter. The same information. Say, look, what he said is that you discredit him. But he's putting something and you're saying nothing. And people are beginning to believe it. So people are beginning to see him. And it's sinking in, and you're getting to an electionary year and nobody is talking about it. So what he said is that it's in the interest of the government to ensure that we have access to information. Citizens have access to information, either through their request or through your media people, or whatever means, anything that will benefit the people, that will make sure they begin to question somebody else's misinformation. Because it's a world of misinformation.
Yes. Okay. So because if people get access to the information through their own means or lawful means, they have many ways to manipulate it. You see, that's the problem. And so, coming back to the same issue, and you just said you just touched on that right now. So, what do we do? Do we ensure that citizens understand what the information means to them, so that they'll be ready to ask for this information? Do we try to ensure that the public knows that's their power? The information is theirs. It's not owned by the government. The government is just holding it in their name, and so because they need that information to be able to make informed decisions. That's the power. That's the power of information. The knowledge it gives them. And so, going forward, I think there should be a co-responsibility. Civil society also have a very big role to play. So there should be some co-responsibility. And there is also the OGP. The OGP, that's one of the important platforms for access to information internationally. And we have one here. We have a branch here. The OGP. Open Government Partnership. It's under the civic education something. It's under NACI. Yes, that's a platform that should be coordinating with the right to access to information. But it's an international platform. And so there should be some kind of co-responsibility. There is LARGE, there is IMC. We all work within the same domain. And so some of these things we need to push them and ensure that and the culture and I'm coming. Let me just wait. And the culture, the way technology is advancing now, and the way the world is becoming so like a smaller village, it does not support the culture of secrecy anymore.
Right.
Definitely. Now we are moving to digital age, so information should be there. Don't keep it. When you keep it, definitely it will land to the wrong hands and it will manipulate it.
Right.
Then it will be detrimental to you.
Quickly, finally,
Actually, you know, that's what we call public trust. And by just proactively disclosing information,
it builds public trust. Perfect.
You boost public trust. But when you don't proactively disclose information,
you're hiding something.
you know, it's like people will say you're hiding something.
Right.
And so this is one of the conversations that we've been kind of having with the public authorities whenever we engage them. You know, this, using the carrot, using the support system. You know, to encourage them. We've been emphasizing to them the advantages, the benefits of proactively disclosing information. In the first place, you save money because you don't really need somebody to be there all the time, 24/7, to be responding to requests. The fact that you have a lot of information already available on your platform, you know, it saves you time. You know, and it's cost effective as well. We've been making this very clear to them. And also, you know, the public, there is what we call a feedback loop. If you are providing services, service delivery, you are delivering services to the public will need to know from the public whether the services are of top quality. You know, the services, are they of top quality or are they substandard? And the only way you need to do that is to provide information about the services and let the public come back to you and let you know whether, yes, you know, and if you don't respond to the public or you don't proactively disclose information, it means there is something that you're hiding, and it means you are not very confident. And you are receiving monies, funds on behalf of the public, and yet you don't want to be transparent, you don't want to be open to them. You see, so one of the things that we have been really emphasizing to them is in the interest of the public authorities, you know, to come out and give out this information, even before the information is requested for. You see? And when public trust is there, you know, a lot of things will happen, you know, and through the feedback loop, public satisfaction will be enhanced. And when the people are happy, everything will be, you know, it's not just after when there is election, then you come and start campaigning and use different methods of winning people over. You have to start winning the people from the word go, you know, get them to participate, you know, what we call democratic participation. Access to information provides that platform for democratic participation, not just when there is an election. You know, it means people are getting involved, like at the local level, for instance. When the market woman, you know, who is selling at the marketplace should be able to go and confront the mayor or the councillor to ask them about why are these services not provided for, when there is money coming from this consolidated fund for toilets to be provided, for instance. That woman should be able to come forward and ask for information from the local authorities, and the local authorities must provide
okay.
that information.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim Sigasho. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ahmed Sahid Nazrala. Thank you very much, Emmanuel Safa Abdullahi. And many thanks to Sierra Network Salon for streaming the show. This is where we end tonight's program. We say thank you to our guests for giving us their time, and thanks to all of you who contributed one way or the other to the production of the program. And if you send in your comments or questions on Facebook, thank you for being a part of the discussion. This has been AYV on Sunday. I am Samuel Wise Bangura saying good night, and up next is our AYV Primetime News.